You're listening to PumaPodcast.
Hi, I'm Tatiana Maligro PumaPodcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka. When we think of Intramuros, we often think of this beautiful walled area right across Manila City Hall, bustling with student life and activities for both local and international tourists. But beyond its new reputation as a tourist hotspot and a historical treasure, the walled city bore witness to some of the most tragic events in our country's history. From wars to colonial invasions to natural calamities. In another Puma Podcast show, What's Up? Araling Panlipunan Rebooted, Siege Tantenko Malolos and Sab Schneider explore some of the darkest events that transpired within Intramuros' walls through a guided tour. After dark, of course.
So my name is Benjamin Canapi and I'm the head tour guide of Wonder Manila. On behalf of our group, thank you very much for being here. Welcome to One Night in Intramuros. This is a dark history tour of the walled city of Intramuros. So this is not your typical tour that we stand in front, for example, this one, and talk about Baroque architecture, Ionic pillars, and so on and so forth. We're going to be talking about darker, more violent stories in this tour. It's not specifically a ghost tour. It's a dark history tour. Although we will be talking about a few ghost stories here and there.
But first of all, why are we like this? Why do we seek out horrors?
Filipinos are totally in love with getting scared. Proof of that is in the amount of media that's available to us. Most of us grew up watching Regal Shocker or Oka Tokat or Magandang Gabi Bayan, Halloween edition. The one time per year that Dolly DeCastro will wear more makeup than usual. It is not the Metro Manila Film Festival if we do not have a horror movie as part of that festival during the Christmas season. The one aspect where this love for everything horror and suspense and thrillers intersects with what we're doing here, which is talking about historical and heritage stuff, is there's a belief that places with history, places with age, have so many stories to tell. And as far as Metro Manila is concerned, nothing has more history than Intramuros.
We'll be talking about a lot of horror in this episode, and a lot of it happened in what is arguably the most horrifying event in our history.
The Battle of Manila, which began in February 1945 and raged on for several weeks.
It's important to understand the context of when this was during the war.
See, this wasn't the beginning of the war. It was the end, when the Japanese already knew that they were losing. They were ordered to retreat.
Unfortunately, if the Japanese soldiers were to go down, they were going to take down as many Filipinos as they could with them.
The Americans were coming, and the Japanese were going full scorched earth.
And so Japanese soldiers set fire to the beautiful city that was once called the Paris of the East and began massacring the Filipinos who lived in it.
The chaos and fear was unimaginable. No matter where you turned, there was violence in the streets.
So you're now standing in front of the Memorial Manila 1945. This memorial was actually unveiled in this location back in 1995 to commemorate the lives lost during the Battle of Manila, an estimated 100,000 civilians. The Battle of Manila was a battle waged between American soldiers who were more than motivated to defeat the Japanese occupying it and against the Japanese soldiers, around 16,000 of them, that were still holding on to Manila, prepared to defend it to the death, whether that was a good idea or not. It starts off very well for the Americans because while the Japanese were prepared for the Americans to arrive, the Americans basically still take them by surprise because of the ferocity and the amount of strength. Their strongest vehicles were the vanguard basically. Because of the tactic, the Americans recaptured key districts and locations in Manila, including the University of Santo Tomas, which was very important to the Americans because the Americans knew that it was being used as a concentration camp. Now, after the very fast first 3 days for the Americans, the battle slows down to a crawl. basically it becomes street per street and corner per corner or even house per house. And in certain locations like the Philippine General Hospital, it was literally floor per floor. First day, first floor. Second day, second floor. Tapos uuwi mo yung Amerikano, then the Japanese will take the first floor, tapos uulitin nila lahat, and so on and so forth. Why? Because being severely outnumbered, had to resort to every single guerrilla tactic available. Now, the Americans were not exactly fresh. No, they didn't just land in Manila and started attacking. They were campaigning along the country for around 6 months. They were running out of ammunition and supplies as well. So, they made the decision to start bombarding Manila with artillery, howitzers, cannon fire, and all of that, which resulted in the destruction of around 60% of Manila. The Japanese, somewhere between fighting the Americans and running away for their lives, was ordered to kill and massacre as many civilians as they could. In fact, most of the massacres happened between February 9 to 13, 1945. The period of time is now referred to as the Manila Massacres.
One of our first stops was in front of the San Ignacio Church, where Ben told us about his friend who could sense spirits.
Example, this corner here of the mission house, my friend saw around a dozen Filipino men kneeling down, as if they were blindfolded, as if their hands were tied behind their backs. And there was a weird energy, almost malevolent, angry, that was revolving around them. Now, before my friend could define anything else that she was seeing, she suddenly lurched forward and fell down. When we picked her up, we asked her if she was okay, what happened to her. And then she basically tells us, can we go somewhere else? Then I'll tell you. Okay, so we go to the next block. And then she tells us, while she was talking about that, somebody hit her in the back of the head. Upon doing research in the area, we do know that around 20 bodies were found in front of this area.
We wondered, why was there no marker talking about the massacre?
And the bodies were found after 1945, which would make them massacre victims. So you would think, massacre victims, why aren't they listed? Why isn't the San Ignacio Church listed as a massacre site? Because 20 bodies is too little.
That's how many massacres took place during the Battle of Manila.
When the Japanese found out that the hospital was treating American soldiers, they stormed the hospital and killed over 100 doctors, nurses, and patients. Then they dumped all the bodies into the ravine beside the hospital. By the time the last few bullets and artillery shells were fired,